Lecherous, curvy, witch, fair, fat. Many words have been used to describe women over the years. The meanings and causes of these words often came from the way a woman presented herself physically. Hair, makeup, clothing, skin. These are all attributes that women have been scrutinised for through the centuries. In medieval England, women would go through what a modern-day woman would call absurd means to achieve the beauty standards of the time. A lot of these standards came from the notion that women were not as good as men. I spoke to Dr. Marta Cobb at the University of Leeds to find out more about medieval women in 14th century literature.
There are some genres of literature that are really about all women, well, except for a few, are just terrible, basically. The whole sex is limited and treacherous and lecherous, and they can't keep their mouths shut, and they can't keep secrets. So just a fallen gender as a whole. Women are often described in terms of their beauty, fair skin, fair hair, heavenly voices. Phrases like whiter than the lily come up a lot.
This opinion of women stems from the fall of humanity, attributed to the first woman Eve and her lack of strength to resist temptation. To push past these negative connotations to their sex and adhere to the beauty standards of the time, women would do peculiar things to their bodies.
There was this ideal, I think often of fair skin, fair hair, also of a very high hairline. So women would apparently sort of pluck their forehead to give the illusion of a much higher forehead, that sort of thing.
When it came to the ideal female figure, it differs greatly from today. Medieval costumer Lynette Withers tells me more.
The desirable body shape at the time that I've chosen for my outfit is a pear shape. So thinner at the top, quite slim, but then coming out to wide hips at the bottom. And you'll see them in manuscripts, they'll have a sway back sort of look. So they sort of push themselves out, so you get very curved postures.
You can see this pear-shaped, fuller body type through the artwork left behind from these times. Medieval, Tudor and Renaissance art all celebrate this ideal female form. Despite this standard, women were not meant to show their figures.
Showing that little bit of skin could be very alluring. I think that's quite hard for us to understand now because, you know, an evening dress can be extremely revealing and still be considered perfectly okay for going out in nowadays. But then you have descriptions of just what probably amounts to small amounts of flesh being revealed as clearly being quite erotic.
Later you start getting more coverings, and those coverings had to cover your neck, and they also had to cover your ears. There was a belief that when Mary conceived Jesus, she did so by the Holy Ghost entering through her ear, and that was apparently one of the excuses for not showing your ears. But mainly it was just covering everything of your face, so very similar to modern day headscarves or the type of wimples that you'll see on nuns.
In Tudor England, there was a lot of politics surrounding the hoods worn by the ladies of the court. Henry VIII's first wife, Catherine of Aragon, wore a gable hood. Large, boxy and modest, this covered all the hair. Fast forward to the racier character of Anne Boleyn, we see the French hood gaining popularity. By showing a tiny bit of extra skin, Anne was considered flirtatious, immoral, and ultimately paid the price for her reputation with her head. Wife number 3, Jane Seymour, firmly distanced herself from this tainted image by banning the French hood and enforcing the old gable hood on the ladies of the court. Later on in the Tudor era, women go to new heights to achieve desirably pale skin. The theory was that if you had pale skin, you did not do any manual labour. Working in the fields would give you a tan and freckles. This was not acceptable for a lady of the Tudor court. When Queen Elizabeth I died in 1603, she had an inch of white makeup on her face. This makeup was called ceruse and was a mix of white lead and vinegar. Many believe this could have contributed to her death of blood poisoning. And this isn't the only time women have gone to potentially fatal lengths to look beautiful. Victorian tight lacing was a popular and dangerous method of wearing your corset. The wearer would gradually reduce the waist size of their corset until it got down to a desirable 22 inches. Compared to the modern US average of 38 inches, this is a minuscule measurement to attain to. I talked to costume technician Alana Marsh about this and looked at some real Victorian dresses.
There is this idea that with the science, the new technologies, you were able to create a much more controlled waist. You had your front busks, you had your steel boning, and you now had steel eyelets that were much, much stronger, less likely for the fabric to rip. So you did see waists becoming so much smaller, so much more well-formed and really quite extreme in some instances. And although the extremes were frowned upon in good society, there was this idea that if you were a well-formed woman, if you were well corseted, if you had an elegant shape, if you were well dressed and you were appropriate with your dressing, that you were somehow morally well-formed and you were morally higher because of the way you dressed, because of your place in society and how you were viewed by others.
But that's not to say that modern women don't go through similarly dangerous body adjustments and enhancements. Waist trainers, popularised by social media influencers, are almost identical to the tight-lacing corsets of the 19th century. Makeup can be worn by the vast majority of women, and modern techniques like contouring can completely change the shape of your face. We aren't that different from our medieval ancestors. Young girls today copy the styles of their favourite celebrities, just as Tudor women copied the styles of their queens. And where the expectations of women have changed, the lengths we go to maybe have not.